Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I wanted to talk a little bit about how we should be looking at our portraits more like a total composition instead of just a figure sitting on the painting surface. Now, what does that mean to look at it as a composition instead of just a portrait? Well, for me, when I am painting any of my portraits, I look at the full picture, what every square inch of that painting surface is going to look like at the end. Now, that may seem like obvious stuff, but for a lot of people that are drawing portraits, you may be just looking at the figure as your one objective, getting that figure to be accurate and having that the face, the proportions, all those things perfect, but overlooking something that can really bring your paintings to the next level, and that is creating a great composition. And this involves things like looking at where the color is located, where the light and dark areas are, where the detail is, and where you want the focus to be, where you want people to be drawn in. All of these things come into play when you're thinking about the entire composition. With that basic understanding, let's talk about before we even get started painting. You want to make sure that your composition is going to work. Of course, if you put a face in the middle of your panel, there's a good chance that portrait compositionally is going to work, but you want to start thinking about the background. There are things you can do, say using Photoshop, that can really help you test out different ideas. I do this quite a bit. I like to bring my portrait into Photoshop, test out a few things and see if I can maybe push the envelope as far as how dramatic I can make the final composition. And you just don't want to be afraid to try different things, try different compositions. There's a lot of different ways that you can control the light, the dark, the color locations. All of these things can be done hundreds of ways with just a face in the middle of your panel. And if you decide to, say, shift the face towards the lower part, the bottom, to the left, to the right, all of these things open up new avenues for your compositions. So keep trying new things in Photoshop. It's a great, quick way to try different things without wasting a bunch of paint. That's why I like doing it myself. And another great way to get ideas is just to simply go to Instagram, go to TikTok, go to websites that have other artists and just see what they're doing for their compositions. There are some really amazing ideas out there, and you can utilize some of those to create your own new thoughts on what directions you might want to go with your portraits. Now, after you've gotten that all figured out, you have a composition that is fairly locked in. You have a good concept as far as what your next painting is going to be. You're now ready to put those first brush strokes down. So, for example, this painting, I have a fairly straightforward composition where the darker areas are toward the bottom third, the upper 2/3 are much brighter, and then towards the center, the exposed portion of the face is brighter than any other area really around the surrounding areas, and that's the composition I decided to go with. I'm using a lot of the rule of thirds, where if you were to break this painting into a grid of 3 horizontal, 3 vertical, you'll see that a lot of those grid lines line up with what I did compositionally here. So that is a really good tried and true method to give yourself a strong composition. The eye line is right at the upper third horizontal line, so you get drawn to the upper third versus towards the dead center. What you usually want to avoid to some degree is having your focal point being the dead center of your painting. And when I got started with this painting process, I was mostly concerned about getting the locations as a whole composition. I didn't jump right into making sure that the facial structure was perfect. I just wanted to get my dark areas, my midtones, my lights, all those things in the right spot so that the overall composition was correct, instead of all the little details like the nose, mouth, eyes, those things. Those come later. For me, I find that thinking of it as a bunch of shapes on the entire panel that go together like a puzzle, that you eventually start building that detail in. That's the way to approach a portrait so that you get a very strong, dramatic final painting. Regarding color and how I approach color, there's 2 different methods that I use, but for the most part, my main method is adding color, slowly building up color to the painting. As you can see at this point, I've really just concerned myself with tonal values and just having a nice base to the entire painting so that I can build color on top of that. You can do it the other way where it's more of a subtractive method. You could just jump into a bunch of color and subtract it out, maybe add some back in and bounce back and forth between adding and subtracting color. But for me, I found that just slowly building color up is a great way to have a progression to your painting that you can control in a very methodical way. You may find that you get frustrated if you try to add some color, throw in some subtle colors, and you're just sort of bouncing all over the place. You may find that you're not getting things done as efficiently. So try different procedures out, see what works for you, and then you'll find that over the course of months, years, that you'll have a system in place that makes sense to you and how your brain works. Everybody's a little different, but for me, I like building color. That's actually a very popular way for a lot of artists to work. If you want to just have all the colors done in one shot where you know you want this color in this location, so you just jump right into that color, and the other location on your panel, you maybe want to do more subtle colors. Feel free to go right to that color if you want, but if you're drawing, if you have a drawing stage that you really want to have accurate, it may make the most sense to just think about the drawing stage. Don't think about color too much. Keep your colors as simple as you want them to be. If you're just dealing with skin tones, just stick with those skin tone colors. You can always go back over it, add some subtle color shifts, and make a more complex painting. There are a lot of ways to make subtle colors happen, and that is sometimes the key to a very successful painting, is not overdoing it with a color. Think about the locations you want that color to be located, whether it's in the background, the foreground, on the actual surface of the subject. There's a lot of locations that you can put color in small doses, and that can make a big difference to the overall feeling of the painting. In my opinion, I think less is more when it comes to color. If you throw a bunch of color on your painting surface, you're going to end up with so much going on that it maybe just muddles the overall impact that your painting is going to have. So as far as this painting, how I'm approaching this one, I'm putting a ton of color in just one location in the upper center area on the top portion of the face. I like to look at my paintings as half abstract and half figurative or half representational. So my brain does do a shift from thinking about the drawing stage and then shifting to more on brush strokes and expressionism and things that create really dramatic shifts from subtle details to very bold color choices that makes my work unique for what I'm trying to accomplish, and that is to create stories with color, light, and texture. And that is something you're also going to have to think about when you're creating your painting. So all of these things really come into play when you're thinking about composition. And if you are just thinking about the portrait itself, you're just thinking about getting the drawing right, you're really only seeing half of the big picture. Now, if you want to learn more about my process and how I approach things, I do have a Patreon channel, which includes tutorials, art downloads, a lot of tips and tricks, and everything to sort of get inside my head and understand my oil painting process. So thank you for watching this video. I will talk to you again next week.